My name is Sharon Farmer, and I'm a member of the League of Women Voters of the Northampton Area, whose membership includes residents of Holyoke. The League of Women Voters, which has chapters all over the U.S., is a nonpartisan political organization open to all interested people, which encourages informed and active participation in government. This forum, which is co-sponsored by the League of Women Voters of the Northampton Area and by the Daily Hampshire Gazette, is part of our ongoing voter education efforts to help voters make informed decisions at the upcoming election on November 2nd. We hope that over the course of this program, you will learn more about Holyoke's two mayoral candidates and what they hope to do for Holyoke. For those of you in our virtual audience, I'm happy to announce that this event is being simultaneously streamed and recorded in English and Spanish. Si desea escuchar en español, usted necesita hacer uso de una computadora en vez de un dispositivo móvil. Luego puede hacer clic en el botón de interpretación en la parte inferior de la pantalla y seguir las instrucciones para escuchar en español. For everyone in the audience, I want to point out that we are not at this time accepting questions from the audience. So your chat and Q&A options have been disabled, and we will not respond to raised hands. All members of the audience, moreover, have been muted. I will now introduce our moderator, Lynn Brodsky. Lynn is on the steering committee of the League of Women Voters of Winchester. She has organized municipal and legislative league debates in that district for several years and has moderated debates and forums in other districts in her capacity as a trained league moderator. Welcome, Lynn.
Thank you, Sharon. Thank you, and welcome citizens and candidates. For our viewers, I will start by introducing everyone, and then I will explain procedures for the forum, which each of the candidates received ahead of time. First, I'd like to welcome Dan Crowley, managing editor of the Daily Hampshire Gazette, which is co-sponsoring this event. Dan will be asking approximately half the questions this evening, and I will ask the other half. Next, in alphabetical order, the two candidates for mayor of Holyoke, Joshua A. Garcia and Michael J. Sullivan. And here are the procedures for this evening. Both candidates will have 2 minutes for an opening statement and 2 minutes for a closing statement. Both will have 90 seconds to respond to each question. Mr. Garcia will be the first to make an opening statement, and Mr. Sullivan will be the first to make a closing statement. For the Q&A part of the evening, Mr. Sullivan will go first in responding to all of my questions, and Mr. Garcia will go first in responding to all of Dan Crowley's questions. League questions were pre-submitted to the Northampton League website by members of the public, and some were generated by League Committee. Each question will be addressed to both candidates, and all questions, whether asked by Dan or myself, have been screened and sorted by the Northampton League to eliminate redundancy and to assure that they are appropriate and relevant to the office of at-large city councilor. Neither of the candidates has seen any of these questions in advance. To the candidates, please set your webinar view to gallery setting. That way, you will be able to see all active participants in this evening's events, as well as a timekeeping window, which will help you keep track of the time that remains for your statements and responses. When the clock has counted down to 15 seconds, the timekeeping window will switch to the color yellow. At this time, you should wrap up your comments. When the clock says stop, I may say thank you and ask that we move to the next speaker. It is against league policy for candidates to make personal reference about other candidates. Also, as a courtesy to our Spanish language translator and to the audience, please refrain from speaking over each other or from speaking over myself and Mr. Crowley. We also ask that no campaign literature, insignia, or other props should be visible in any of our participant windows. Finally, if Dan or I make a mistake skipping one of you or some other error, please do let us know so we can correct the error. So we will begin with the candidates' opening statements. You have 2 minutes each. Mr. Garcia.
Thank you to the organizers for organizing this special forum tonight. And certainly I want to give thanks to Mike Sullivan for participating in this event tonight. My story goes as far back as when my mother and my grandmother first migrated here to the city of Holyoke from Arroyo, Puerto Rico. I grew up in South Holyoke, was born out of Providence Hospital, grew up in South Holyoke, went through the public school system, and went on to college from there at Westfield State University, where I earned both my bachelor's and my master's degree. I landed my first career opportunity at the Holyoke Housing Authority. And then from thereafter, after 5 years, went on to the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission, where I worked as the municipal services manager, working with local governments across the valley with assessing inefficiencies and coming up with solutions to improve municipal services. And it wasn't too long after that where I landed my current career as town administrator at the town of Blandford. And so I want folks to understand that in Holyoke, we have an antiquated form of government where the mayor is the city manager. And if you've never done it before, it's complicated. It's very complex. So usually more often than never, that means learning curves. Learning curves are expensive. They impact the quality of services and ultimately impacts the tax rate. So with my regional and municipal experience, I'm looking forward to hit the ground running on day one to navigate the challenges ahead so that we can put Holyoke on a much better path forward, and so that we're ultimately growing our city and improving the quality of life for everyone together. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia. Mr. Sullivan.
Hey, thank you. And I want to thank the League of Women Voters and the Daily Hamp Gazette for hosting this debate, as well as everyone watching at home. I'm a lifelong resident of Holyoke and a graduate of Holyoke High. I served in the Air National Guard out in Westfield and graduated from UMass. I started my own business here in Holyoke and hired hundreds of people over the years. I know how to make tough decisions and how to create opportunity for others. I've also served on our city council for the last 6 years, and I know what's at stake in the city. Holyoke has had a rough time in recent years. We've had a budget mismanagement of our budget, and failures in decision-making. This has caused our taxes to go up, our city to fall behind, and it's heartbreaking to see it happen. And we absolutely cannot afford to repeat the mistakes of the past. Interim Mayor Terry Murphy is doing a tough job well, but to continue to move forward, Holyoke needs a strong mayor who will make the right decisions, balance the budget, and bring stability back to City Hall. We need to create the opportunities for our residents to get a good education, and we need to create the opportunities for people to have access to good paying jobs. What we can't do is continue to have our schools in receivership or continue to have a vocational school that fails to deliver the education our children need in order to be successful. We don't need another mayor who is going to use Holyoke as a stepping stone in a career path. I'm not out there applying for other jobs in Provincetown. I'm not out there applying for jobs in Grafton, Hamden, Hadley, or Lanesboro. I'm seeking only one job, and that's to be your mayor, so we can make Holyoke a better place for all of us to live. I believe in Holyoke. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Sullivan. So we're moving on to the question and answer portion of the forum, and you have 90 seconds to respond to each question. So I will start. The first question goes to you, Mr. Sullivan. What, in your estimation, is the greatest challenge facing Holyoke right now, and what would you do to address that challenge?
Well, the greatest challenge in Holyoke right now is our aging infrastructure. Everything we need to do in the city right now, whether it's new housing, new schools, attracting new industry, we have to rebuild our infrastructure. We have an aging water system. We have aging sewer system. We have federally mandated stormwater separation problems that are being exacerbated by climate change. And it's going to take a lot of effort to get this accomplished, to start doing the things we need to build a new future, to build a new path for Holyoke. And it's not a pretty picture. It's not the kind of glamorous projects you see, but it's what we need to do, put the foundation, the building blocks back in place. Second, and I've got to say, I've got a few seconds left. Second to that, we're faced with, in more than many other committees, with the effects of the opioid epidemic, homelessness, a low per capita income, and having the highest commercial tax rate in the Commonwealth. So when you lump all of this together, it's a tremendous challenge. And I really bring the experience, my years on the council, my years in the industry to accomplish what we need to do.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Garcia.
No, excuse me. Thanks for the question. I think that it's important to note that I'm certainly not trying to become the mayor for a retirement plan. When you ask the question of what are the most important challenges currently impacting Holyoke, we can sit around and talk about infrastructure, which I don't disagree with Mike. We can talk about the quality of our education system, and I don't disagree there. And we can talk about public safety downtown, issues of homelessness, and I don't disagree there either. The greatest challenge currently, I have to tell you, is our budget. Currently, we're operating at a $2 million deficit. The city, for one reason or another, hasn't been able to close. We have a negative $300,000 certified free cash balance. We're not appropriately reporting things to the Department of Revenue. We're operating in areas at deficits. And so when we talk about each of these quality of life issues, they're all very dependent on how well we're able to manage our resources internally. And so that's where my focus has been in this campaign. That's where I know of where we can impact positively the quality of life issues in our city. We also have businesses impacted by COVID, and we need to work on rapid recovery efforts, but none of that can happen without sound management. And this is something that I've already been doing in my existing careers at the town of Blandford as town administrator. Thank you.
Thank you. So Dan Crowley will offer the next question.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Garcia, Mr. Sullivan, for joining us tonight in the league, which we've partnered with a lot over the years in these types of forums. We're happy to be here and be part of the process. My first question is, in your view, what is the role of the mayor in helping the city recover from the economic impacts of the pandemic? Are there any specific initiatives you would like to bring to the office in your early days?
I'm first, or is Mike?
Mr. Garcia, you're first. Yeah.
Thank you. So I often like to describe to people the role of mayor is more often than never almost like a quarterback of a football team. And we have a great football team in Holyoke right now, but what's missing is the quarterback. I think certainly, when you're talking about management, it's about cross coordination of departments. It's about facilitating collaboration. It's about managing contracts and implementing them timely. It's about managing the budget and being sure that we're navigating or mitigating as much as possible any potential liability or harm to public resources. And so my role as mayor, as the manager of the city, is going to be exactly that, is to facilitate a process that's transparent and cooperative between departments so that we're providing the adequate resources department needs so that they can go forward and do the important quality of life work that we all expect. And so, yeah, when you ask this question about the role of the mayor, that's it. And that's what's missing right now. And it's around this time when healthy governments all across the Commonwealth are starting their budget process. And certainly after November 2nd, something I want to start hitting the ground running on day one so that we can get into fiscal year 23 strong and fiscally sound.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Sullivan?
Yeah, so could you repeat the question for me?
Oh, Dan, you're muted.
question was, what do you see as the role of the mayor in helping the city recover from the economic impacts of the pandemic? And are there any specific initiatives you'd like to bring to the office if elected in your early days?
Yeah, well, naturally, the mayor is the, Josh says quarterback, I say CEO. We've got to bring all the department heads together. We both attended a very good meeting. I once again commend Mayor Murphy as the work he's done as far as putting the city back on course and doing a good job of helping us recover from the pandemic. We all couldn't thank him enough. There's still a lot of work to be done. I'll come back to what I had said previously, and you'll probably hear it a lot more tonight. We have a once in a lifetime opportunity with the COVID relief money to repair an infrastructure that is broken. And I mean completely broken, and forcing real challenges for the future. Without repairing the infrastructure of the city, there's nothing that can go forward, not new housing, not new businesses. And one thing we've learned through the pandemic is that we have to treat fiber, we have to treat the internet as just as much a valuable piece of our infrastructure. And we have an opportunity now with this relief money to capitalize, expand on that, make it more affordable to people, and have a more reliable, resilient system going forward.
Thank you. So the next question, first for Mr. Sullivan and then Mr. Garcia. How would you characterize race relations in Holyoke, and what role can or should the mayor play in addressing any concerns with regard to race relations?
I've grown up in Holyoke all my life, and I've always felt Holyoke to be a very diverse community, much more diverse than many of our surrounding communities. And Holyokeers have always done a great job throughout history, as far as I'm concerned. We've had our problems, we've had stumbles along the way, but we've always taken care of it. We've always done a good job providing opportunity for everybody. I love this town. I love the way everyone has always gotten along. Anytime there has been instances of racism, I think they've been handled very well throughout the city. The citizens of Holyoke do a great job. I think it's one of our strengths. It's a real something I take pride in the city, and I'm very proud of.
Thank you. Mr. Garcia?
Just repeat the question one more time, please.
How would you characterize race relations in Holyoke, and what role can or should the mayor play in addressing any concerns with regard to race relations?
Thanks for the question. Obviously, very important. When I look at the population, we're 54% Hispanic at the moment. And so that means that when we're putting our government together, we have to be sure that our government is reflective and responding to the values of every corner of our city. And so when you ask me, what role can the mayor play? The role that the mayor can play is to be sure that we work collaboratively with our council to assess folks that are within each of the neighborhoods of our community, to step up and serve on boards and committees, so that when we're making decisions that impact their neighborhood, that people are represented. I don't think Mike Sullivan answered the question there, and certainly we know from the last debate when he mentioned that there's nothing the mayor can do. And so, just know that me being Puerto Rican myself, I know what it means to a lot of people to potentially have the first Puerto Rican mayor in the city of Holyoke. But first and foremost, obviously, I am Holyoker, representing West Holyoke to South Holyoke. But we need to come together as a community to do what we can to empower our neighbors to step up and make decisions that are theirs, that belong to them as citizens of Holyoke.
Thank you. Next question, Dan.
Thank you. The topic of a police department audit has been discussed by city officials at various times during the past year. Do you support such a review? Why or why not?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if we're talking about any department, be it police, fire, DPW, building, as managers, it's important for us to assess the operabilities, understand where the inefficiencies are, and putting forward practices of which that eliminates those inefficiencies, so that we're providing optimum services for taxpayers. When I hear about concerns with overtime issues at the police department, that's just a symptom of a larger problem. That is why when I know Mike Sullivan mentioned earlier about infrastructure, crumbling infrastructure, that's a symptom of a bigger problem. The DPW problems with trash pickup and the schools being in receivership, this is a symptom of a bigger problem. And that problem is just simply management. And so that is why I've been solely focused through this whole campaign, stressing the importance of focusing on our internal operations. To be sure that whatever budget parameters are given to us, that we're responsible fiduciary agents to the community, and making sure that we're de-escalating liability and any potential fraud. Audits are not a bad thing. That's good. It sets the benchmarks. It tells you what you're doing wrong, and we retreat and we pivot to make sure that we're turning the tide and doing it right. So when you ask that question, yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Mr. Sullivan?
Yep, thank you. So when I think of an audit, I think of it from a business perspective. Any good business, regardless of how well run they are, will conduct a periodic audit. And we're talking about two different types of audit here, best practices, and that's one thing. But when we talk about a financial audit, right, that's bringing in an outside firm and having a good look at how the money is being spent. And in particular with overtime, we shouldn't miss the fact that it is more than just the regular city budgeted overtime that we need to look at it. It's how the grant money is being spent, how these resources are being utilized. The proper procedures are in place for accounting for the expenditures of the grant money. In every grant that we receive, one of the terms in there is, and to account for the expenditures of said grant. And that is what is not being done. That's what we need to find out and see if there's resources that could be reallocated in different forms. Different practices, yes. Different venues, yes, to accomplish safer streets, lower crime, protect the community, and also restore confidence in the public as to how our department is being run.
Thank you. The next question is, starting with Mr. Sullivan, how would you characterize civic engagement in Holyoke? And what might the mayor's office do to improve levels of engagement?
So by civic engagement, that's kind of a loaded question, but I'll answer that as best as I can. The mayor's office is obviously the face of the city as well. We have many venues in the city, programs through our Parks and Recreation Department, through the school system. A lot of it focuses through the mayor's office, welcoming new businesses, participating in civic functions, council on aging. There's a multitude of things that go on throughout the city that absolutely require the support of the mayor. The mayor should be the leader in many of those projects, many of those endeavors, and giving direction to those various departments. One of the places I would especially focus is in our Parks and Recreation Department. I have seen other cities where they run as many as 60 programs during the summer. I'd like to see many of the programs I enjoyed as a youth restored. In other areas of civic engagement, downtown development, downtown businesses, being visible, being out there in front of the efforts of our local business community, all of this stuff is a vital role of the mayor.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Garcia?
No, yeah, thanks for the question. I did want to quickly address, because I know the previous question on the budget and finance, certainly I don't think, we had disagreed at all. We pretty much more or less the same thing, but just to be clear, I've actually done it. So when I stepped into the town of Blandford, there were consistent years of negative free cash balances, untimely reporting to the Mass Department of Revenue. There were accounts that weren't being reconciled at all. There were multiple deficit accounts that were not being addressed and were structural in nature. Vendors were not being paid timely. Payroll was often impacted, and the town hadn't had an audit since 2012. And so these were things that I helped turn around, and certainly were able to put the town on a much stronger path forward, something that Mike has never done. Going back to civic engagement, local government is designed so that no one person's in total power and control. It requires cooperation and collaboration between the local government and its community. I know Mike Sullivan alluded to the fact that we're not a quarterback, we're the CEO, and he's a businessman, so he wants to do top-down decisions. That's not how I operate. That's not how government is designed to operate. Government's designed to work from the bottom up and the middle out. And so I do look forward to work collaboratively with our council, collaboratively with every neighborhood in our city on strategies to empower and support them to make the decisions that are theirs.
Thank you. Dan?
Thank you. What will be the challenges and benefits of replacing a long-term mayor?
The challenges of replacing a long-term mayor. You mean, so I'm sorry, but the question is not really clear.
Well, you had a mayor in for 10 years in office. What will be the challenges of coming in and replacing someone who's been for a decade?
I think, the greatest challenges is going to be just dealing with the dysfunction that's currently going on at City Hall. I mean, certainly local government issues, they're inevitable. They're going to happen. And unlike Mike Sullivan, who responds out of frustration, as he alluded to at the last debate, the mayor, the manager the people, you can't be frustrated when responding and navigating issues. And so I know that the challenges ahead are complex, but nothing that we can't overcome. And I'm very much looking forward to being able to utilize the skill set and the experience that I have built at the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission, as well as the town of Blandford, to facilitate the necessary efforts to help close these deficiencies that are in front of us today, because ultimately it's these deficiencies that are impacting the greater economic viability of what we can accomplish in the city of Holyoke. The greatest challenge of replacing a mayor of over 10 years, I can't say much to that, except that it's going to be to help close those gaps that were created throughout those 10 years.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Sullivan?
Well, as far as closing the gap, I'm going to use a few minutes to rebut a few of Mr. Garcia's comments. He keeps referring to his ability to do that through his town manager experience. And in fact, he hasn't been a town manager. He's been a town administrator. And most of the decisions and everything is laid out by the select board. And when you compare Blandford with Holyoke, which he is doing and touting as his management experience to replace this 10-year mayor we had, you're comparing a place that had 30 employees compared to over 1,000 in Holyoke. You're talking about a place that has a population density of 24 people per square mile versus Holyoke, which has 2,000 people per square mile. A city budget in Holyoke of 150 million versus a budget in Blandford of 3.5 million. It just doesn't compare. And it just emphasizes to me when somebody says they're ready from day one, it's just not there. I've run large businesses. I've negotiated with large corporations. I've served on the city council for 6 years. I am intimately familiar with the budget of Holyoke and the needs of the city. And it won't be a problem for me in transitioning to what's gone on over the last 10 years.
Okay, thank you. The next question, what in your estimation are the greatest challenges faced by Holyoke's neediest residents, and how might City Hall work to begin to address their needs? Mr. Sullivan?
Well, the greatest need in Holyoke is to provide good paying jobs for those needy residents. We are a broken city right now. As I've said previously, it's very tough to attract businesses to Holyoke, businesses that will supply good paying jobs, economic opportunity. It's just not there right now. We have the highest commercial tax rate in the Commonwealth. Our education system is broken. We're under state receivership. Our trade school is broken. It's not providing our students with an opportunity to land good paying jobs. It doesn't supply a ready workforce to support new industries coming into the city. But the list goes on.
See, you're all finished with your answer?
Yeah, I'm finished.
Okay, so Mr. Garcia, do you need me to read the question again?
No, it's okay. And
Okay.
I just want to just say that although Mike Sullivan is a very nice guy, I just think that he don't get it. He just doesn't get it. And so, yeah, I respond to a select board. In government, as I mentioned earlier, no one person is in total power and control. You have other bodies you have to cooperate and collaborate with. Just like in the city of Holyoke, we need a mayor that can work effectively with our council. And so you can rest assured that as a manager in the city of Holyoke, it's going to be nothing but collaboration from the mayor's office with our council to be sure that we're keeping up with the priorities of the body and keeping up with the needs of our departments. And 3.5, it's actually a $5 million budget. But nevertheless, no matter how small a community is or how large, we're still have to follow the same rules of Mass General Law. And it's still more experienced than a volunteer city council. It's still more experienced than a former business owner whose business went bankrupt back in 2007, 2008. And so it doesn't qualify you to run a local government, unfortunately. The greatest challenges facing our residents, I gotta say, is equitable representation is lacking. We need to do better at making sure that we're providing better representation of the people throughout the community, and that we're navigating the budget effectively so that we're implementing those improvements in neighborhoods, parks, streets, sidewalks, that we're improving those areas in every corner of our city.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you. Just shifting subjects here a little. Are you satisfied with the direction the cannabis industry has taken in the city? If so, explain why. And is there anything you'd like to see done any differently as it continues to gain a foothold in the city?
Sure. Great question. Thank you so much. I am supportive of the cannabis industry that's coming into the city. I think that's one important piece to the greater economic development puzzle. It's not the know-all, say-all. Certainly, I'm looking forward to see other spin-off opportunities that come off from this new growth opportunity in the city, from downtown restaurants, which, Holyoke has seen 6 new restaurants open during the pandemic, while other restaurants everywhere else were closing. So that's a positive. I think what we do need to do to help mitigate these growth pressures is start working on a citywide master plan. Certainly there's this desire to develop here in the city, but a master plan is going to help us it's a robust community development planning document to help us decision makers, be it the mayor and the council, well, an administrator, since Mike Sullivan thinks I'm, have no form of authority or power, do what we can to collaborate and work together to be sure that as we make those decisions and embrace these developments in our city, that we're doing so by the desires of the community, whether if you live in West Holyoke or in South Holyoke. We need a much more robust community engagement process in our government, because right now it just feels like the council is making all decisions, not necessarily prioritizing where activity should take place.
Hey. Thank you, Mr. Sullivan.
Yeah, thank you. Well, once again, I'll have to use a little of my time to rebut Mr. Garcia's previous statement. My company never filed bankruptcy, and I would not use this as a platform to tell any lies about my opponent, and I would appreciate the same in return. So as far as the cannabis industry goes, it's something throughout my 6 years in the council I've been in favor of. I've voted on, I believe, every single special permit that has come before us. I've been open to the new businesses coming in. I think we've reached a point now with what we have coming into the city that we have to take a closer look at the compliance with the host city agreements. We have an opportunity to be a little more selective, to look at the financial capabilities of some of the companies coming in. We've seen an awful lot of them come in and fail. I think an in-depth look right now at what we have in the queue might be in order also. Also, while I welcome the cannabis industry, I don't want to see Holyoke again become a one industry city like we were in the past. That's a mistake we made. I think we've got to capitalize on our green energy footprint, use that to attract new other businesses to the city as well.
Okay, thank you. And just a quick reminder to everyone that we would like to ask the candidates avoid any attack that might be construed as a personal reference. So the next question is to Mr. Sullivan first. What, in your estimation, are the greatest challenges for our K through 12 students, their parents, and their teachers? And what would you do as mayor to begin to address these challenges?
Well, the first thing I would do as mayor, I'm also going to be the chair of the school committee. And we had a mayor that was absent for most of his tenure from the school committee. And one thing I can assure the citizens of Holyoke is I will never miss a school committee meeting. Right now, the receivership program is an absolute failure. We need to set some benchmarks. We need to hold DESE accountable to establish what we need to do to exit receivership and take back local controls. It's not going well, and it's throughout the entire system. We have a wonderful vocational facility at Dean Tech that is totally underutilized. I see other communities where the students are graduating and they're moving right away into good paying jobs. They're coming out with union 2,000 hours in their academy towards a union apprenticeship. They're coming out with an OSHA card in their hand. The trades are really looking for growth for employees, for good paying jobs, people willing to move into those lines of work. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Garcia?
No, thank you. And I do want to just take a quick second to apologize to Mr. Sullivan. I didn't mean a bankruptcy comment there, but instead just know that the business that was ran was in 2007, 2008. None of us really know much about what happened between now and then and what happened to that business. And it's just, point is it just doesn't qualify to be the mayor of a local government. But nevertheless, on the schools, I think that on mutual respect here, I think this is where Sullivan and I totally agree. On I do want to see us get back on a path to local control. By doing that, I'm looking forward to work collaboratively with the school board members. I am very thankful to see a receiver who is very open and transparent with the school board, working with our council, working with the current local acting mayor. And so it's going to be important that we communicate to the community at large what those benchmarks are between now and the next 4 years, so that we can transition back to local control, so that when we're looking back measuring our successes, that we can know for sure that we're still on that path. And so local control, it's where it is. There's a reason why we are in receivership, however, and it won't do us any justice to fight the state, but instead to work together with the state so that we're getting on that path and regaining the local control.
Okay, thank you. Dan, the next question is yours.
Thanks. I'd like to stick on the topic of receivership since we're on it here. In your view, has there been any benefits to receivership? What has the city learned from it over these many years, and what do you think it's going to take? When do you see it ending?
I think, it's such a great follow-up question, and a very complex one at that, and requires more discussion and deliberating on, because we've seen a lot of pros, we've seen cons. I think there are things that are being done that, us in Holyoke, us Hoyokers look at and say, yeah, well, we could have done that, or you're not doing anything much differently than what we already did. And what's the difference between if it was under our control or your control? So we can go back and forth on the pros and cons, but nevertheless, it's here. There are some strategies that have been implemented that have made some improvements in certain areas. There are debates as to whether or not some of these strategies, when we talk about reducing the graduation rate, as well as issues around chronic absenteeism, nevertheless, understanding what these strategies are, working together with the receiver and doing what we can to just regain local control. I think from what I heard, just speaking with school board members, we're already on that path. There's a lot that's already going on, and it's looking very positive to regain local control. But nevertheless, to the community at large, it's frustrating. We don't understand it. But what we got to do what we can to get the schools back and just improving outcomes in our district.
Thank you. Mr. Sullivan?
Yeah. Again, I'm going to have to ask Dan, could you repeat the original question?
Yeah, it was a follow-up on the receivership subject. What have been some of the benefits of receivership, if any? What has the city learned from it during these many years? I think it's maybe, I'm guessing it's 7th year. I could be wrong. And when do you see it ending? What will it take to end receivership?
Well, I don't think there have been any benefits to receivership at all. We're no better off than we were 6 years ago. In some respects, I think we're worse off. Some of the programs that the state has tried have not only been a failure, but a huge step backwards. Both Mr. Garcia and myself had an opportunity to go to the high school for film a podcast the other day. And I cannot believe the language I heard in just a 15-second trip from the front office to the recording studio. It's lacking in discipline. The receiver, it's just an absolute disaster. I don't think we can take back local control soon enough. There's nobody in the state that realizes the problems in Holyoke that are specific to Holyoke and none of our surrounding communities. The socioeconomic problems we have, the parenting problems that we face, the challenges that these teachers encounter every day are different than they are in any of the other communities. And only Holyokers can understand and deal with that.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Sullivan, in terms of energy production, Holyoke is one of the greenest cities in the Commonwealth, but if we are to meet our state's zero emissions goals, we need to do more. How would you use your position in City Hall in order to help our city meet these goals?
Well, there are multiple ways. First of all, Holyoke Gas and Electric is doing a fantastic job. And one of the things I would do is to fight any outside interference or anybody that would seek to dismantle Holyoke Gas and Electric. We have hydro opportunities also to expand on the existing capacity that would add 2 megawatts. That's enough to power 1,400 homes. Now, that is one of the things that would keep electricity affordable, so more people could transition off of gas. There are also other alternatives, new technologies that HG&E has brought, industries that we've attracted to the city that are capable of using natural gas to produce electricity also, but at the same time have a zero carbon emissions footprint. And it's very exciting technologies like this. It's technologies that I'm very well versed in at this point. I would support the expansion of these to keep growing our green energy footprint, keep us a leader, not only in the region, but an example throughout the country.
Thank you. Mr. Garcia?
Sorry, could you just repeat the question one more time, please?
Yes. In terms of energy production, Holyoke is one of the greenest cities in the Commonwealth. But if we are to meet our state's zero emission goals, we need to do more. How would you use your position in City Hall in order to help our city meet these goals?
I think what we're going to have to do is just bottom line, do what we can to transition to renewable energy. I think, we have many residential homes and many businesses alike that do move here because of our competitive advantage, not only in the region, but because of our energy. A lot of them that are currently hooked up on gas and many who are not because of the existing moratorium. But we have to do what we can to reduce our carbon footprint and develop and create new programs that help de-escalate the need for more gas and transition into renewable energy. As a local government, there are certainly programs out there that we can take advantage of to be sure that we're leading by example, whether if it's through green communities or the mass vulnerability preparedness program, to implement project ideas that specifically reduce our carbon footprint and and achieve some of our energy reduction goals. And whatever our energy reduction goals, I'm not sure. Maybe there are, maybe there isn't. If there isn't, we should be working on putting a plan together that does identify what those goals are. And whatever plan that we do move forward and create, that it has some sort of climate resiliency twist to it, so that we can continue to achieve our climate reduction path forward.
Thank you. Dan?
Thank you. Who is your mentor or mentors, and how will what you've learned from them help you as mayor?
Who are my mentors? Well, so I like to often joke with people and tell everybody that I'm this young guy, 35 years old. I'm actually a very old soul, trapped in a young guy's body. And a lot of my mentors are 60, 70-year-old folks that I can often consult with and help me grow. The thing is about me is that I'm always trying to understand where my weaknesses are so that I can turn them around and turn them into strengths. And so even during my time as town administrator, there's been a lot of stressful moments of where, a little bit of mentorship is necessary to help you navigate the path forward so that personally, you're keeping yourself together. And I think that these are the things that are, I'm sure, going to help me as mayor in this leadership capacity. I do have a lot of other mentors, obviously, my mother, who I love dearly, and my family. My wife is probably one of the biggest mentors also. She keeps my heart in the right place. With that, needless to say, I'm surrounded by great people that definitely helps contribute to keeping my heart right and making the strong necessary decisions that need to take place.
Thank you. Mr. Sullivan?
Yeah, thank you. Very fortunate. My father was one of my greatest mentors. I didn't realize what a great mentor he was, unfortunately, until very late in his life. As a young man, I was quite rebellious and wanted to go my own way and didn't heed him often enough. But later in life, we established a very close bond. He started a business here in Holyoke, actually right here in the building I'm in right now. And it was phenomenal opportunity working with him, watching him raise a family. He played semi-pro football also and build a business. When he got out of the Navy, he had to go to Holyoke Junior College at the time before it was Holyoke Community College. I just recently posted a picture of the fire there in an old book we dug out. The work ethic, watching him raise 4 kids while he was going to college, trying to start a business, that was phenomenal. It was great. And the neighborhood we grew up in, the way all of the neighborhood came together, but my dad would be there almost bringing other kids along, just like it was part of our own family.
Okay, thank you. So the next question is, what vision do you have for the future of Whiting Reservoir and the Mount Tom Quarry? Mr. Sullivan.
Well, right now I'm waiting for the final results on the Whiting Reservoir Study Commission. I was really troubled to see in recent days a lot of disinformation put out about my role in that. It's one of the my leading accomplishments, I think, was in getting the Whiting Reservoir Study Committee off the ground in the first place. We wanted a comprehensive study of all of the possibilities, be they from one end of the spectrum to the other, so that every scenario, no matter what it is, was laid out on the table for us to have a good look at it and to know what our opportunities were, what our challenges were, and most important, what the public wanted. And the makeup of that committee, I'm very proud to say, I think it's been a very diverse group, a very hardworking group. They're near the end of it. I'm waiting to see that report. I think it's a jewel, and it's a shame that so many things about what's going on there have been misrepresented in public forums.
Mr. Garcia.
Repeat the question one more time, please.
What vision do you have for the future of Whiting Reservoir and the Mount Tom Quarry?
Yeah, so there's a Joshua Garcia personal vision, and then there's and I think Mike is hitting the nail on the head, and probably the one good thing that we're doing here is, you know, it's as managers, it's going to be important when things like this come up that you look at it at every angle possible, and you do so in a very inclusive way. Josh Garcia, personally, the Holyoker, wants to see the area protected and preserved. You know, we have to do what we can to protect our natural spaces, our green spaces and resources. This is not anything new that any municipality is doing. This is actually the recommendation across the Commonwealth when combating issues around climate resiliency and protecting the environment. And so Josh Garcia, personally, yes, protect and preserve, but obviously, like Mike, want to see the outcome of this report. You have a group of residents who are coming together and taking a hard look on options, and we'll be coming forward with a set of recommendations, and certainly very much looking forward to see what those recommendations are, so that we can work together to navigate what we need to do to protect the area in a responsible way.
Thank you, Dan.
Thanks. What areas in city government have you identified as being most neglected in terms of resources, and what plans do you have as mayor to change that?
So from the outside looking in, and I can tell you that there's probably a whole different story when I'm from actually the inside. But from the outside looking in, I want to say the Parks and Rec department and this I don't know, I don't want to call it shaky, this relationship that it has with the DPW. You have a Parks and Rec that's responsible for park activities and managing and maintaining the parks, but nevertheless don't have direct oversight authority over those at the DPW that are ultimately responsible for providing the personnel necessary to maintain the parks. And we've heard from the DPW superintendent before that there's an order of priority when it comes to carrying out the objectives of the DPW, and parks are the last. And that breaks my heart because we have a lot of families in our city that access that it's a quality of life. They bring their children there. A lot of first-time families, children grow up in neighborhoods where they engage in their nearby parks in their neighborhoods. And when they're not properly maintained, when the grass are not properly cut, it contributes to the greater concern to the community at large. So that's just one area, but ultimately I can almost guarantee there are a bunch of other things we could talk about.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Sullivan?
Well, I would start out by agreeing with Josh as far as these two departments needing a lot of attention right now. Especially in the DPW, what we have is a real problem that's gone on over the last 10 years. And once again, it's from a lack of leadership and a lack of ability to do any capital planning. We have equipment that is, some of it 35 years old, some of the dump trucks, snow plows. They're not up to the day-to-day routines. They're unsafe for the employees. And we just need to really get upgrades in all of the equipment and give those employees the right tools to work with. As far as the Parks and Recreation Department, I'm looking a lot beyond just the conditions of the grounds. It is important, but it's the lack of programs for our youth. As I alluded a little earlier, one of our surrounding communities last summer ran 60 programs for the youth of the city. And we ran, I believe, 20. And they were so forward thinking in this other community. And I'm not going to give them too many props. I'm not going to say who they were. But when their programs were full, they brought in people, allowed people from other communities to go. I know because my nieces and nephews went. And they used that extra capacity to hire local residents to help run and give summer youth more programs and more opportunities themselves. So it's things like that.
You're on mute, Lynn.
Thank you. Next question. What is your stance on the Mount Tom Dunkin' Donuts controversy?
Well, once again, the planning board has had meeting after meeting on that. We've had public debates. We've got a lot of people arguing and a lot of false information going out. One of the things that nobody's mentioned to me that I really don't understand, when somebody's trying to block a business from coming in, how is it, and talking about the safety and traffic problems, and traffic's been the big issue there, how it is safe when we have a banquet facility that has wedding receptions and functions and people drinking alcohol and consuming alcohol. And we have a restaurant up there that serves alcohol. But to have a place that serves coffee all of a sudden becomes such a huge problem. And then I hear other things. It's not going to be a destination. It's not going to add to traffic flow. People aren't going to drive to the top of the mountain just to get a cup of coffee when you've got places at the bottom. It's going to be just people that are traversing the road anyways. Now, there are environmental concerns. There are other interests. I think everybody should be heard out, but I think it needs to be done in a fair and more level conversation in the public than what's gone on so far.
Thank you. Mr. Garcia,
Just repeat the question one more time, please.
what is your stance on the Mount Tom Dunkin' Donuts controversy?
So, I think this is a particular scenario of which where, the planning board, you had the developer navigating the desires of what the planning board had requested to ultimately get to an end conclusion. And that power rested with the planning board. The decision was made. Whether or not, if I agree with it or not, I have to honor the decision of the board. I can't just, as again, as I alluded earlier on, local government's designed so that there's no one person in total power and control. There's checks and there's balances and there's systems and there's processes, and we have to be sure. I guess just myself as an administrator or as manager or as mayor, as long as we are operating within the eyes of the law, and we're not deferring from that when making decisions, that is the direction we ultimately go. So that's really where my position is.
Okay, thank you. Dan?
Thank you. Does the city need a finance director type position or CFO? Why or why not?
First.
Yes, Mr. Garcia.
Yeah, great question. And certainly I think this is going to be a much more longer term strategic discussion, nothing we can resolve next year or the next 3 years. When we talk about the form of government of which we need to operate in, because the issues in front of us that are hurting everything is very clear, and it's a path we shouldn't be on. And the reason why we're there is because we currently lack the internal infrastructure that helps adequately maintain the day-to-day of our local government. And so I think, Josh Garcia can tell you that we need a CFO or a comptroller or a city manager, but nevertheless, that's not a Josh Garcia decision, nor is it a council decision. I think what we have to do is re-engage a charter commission and take a hard look at our charter. And I think Mike agrees with this too. I remember him and I, years past, having an informal conversation about this, taking a hard look at our charter and reviewing other practices across the Commonwealth and coming up with solutions that work for Holyoke, whether if it's a CFO or a comptroller or a city manager or mayoral council form of government, manager council form of government, that we look at what works for Holyoke and we move in that direction, because how we're operating now is inefficient and it's costly and it's creating too much liability for taxpayers.
Thank you. Mr. Sullivan?
Yeah, I think it's a great opportunity to modernize one of the key functions of city government. In comparing it with my business experience, any good CEO is going to be backed up by a very good CFO as well. We've got an opportunity to streamline some of the processes, modernize some of the processes, and provide the mayor with timely information, not be waiting till the end of a fiscal year, provide real-time knowledge as to how the city is performing, how revenue is coming in, how the different departments are managing their budgets. I think it's the right direction ahead. It is a bit of a challenge because it will require a charter change. As far as a charter commission, we tried that in the past. Too many other issues got loaded on to the job of that one board, and then was voted as a package. And this is one line item, I think, that should be taken out individually. It's just that important to the overall strength and health of the city.
Thank you. The next question, Mr. Sullivan first, and then Mr. Garcia. What role would you play as mayor in addressing homelessness and drug addiction in Holyoke?
Well, as the mayor, I would take a much more active stance. The problem with homelessness, well, addiction, obviously they're very, very much related in Holyoke. Do we need to engage people in a more productive way to get them into the programs and into the services that are already out there and being provided? We absolutely do. And that's going to be one of the big challenges. At the same time, we've got to make it more difficult for people to exist in that condition. And that could be done through code enforcement of existing codes. And I mean this without violating anybody's constitutional rights. Just there's a lot of other things that go on that are making it difficult for so many other things to happen in our city. It's making it difficult for businesses to survive downtown. It's making it dangerous for people to come downtown. It's making it dangerous for children to make their way to schools. So it's a multi-pronged attack that we have to go on to solve this complex issue. And it is going to be a challenge, and it's going to have to be led by the number one mayor's office right there.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Garcia?
Lynn, question one more time, please.
What role would you play as mayor in addressing homelessness and drug addiction in Holyoke?
Yeah, so this is a major concern, and I'm sure Mike gets this too, as we go around and we connect with people and we go knock on doors. Folks consistently bring up concerns around the homelessness problem. And I can tell you that as mayor, it's going to be important we continue to do what we can to increase our affordable housing stock, to support, to advocate for programs that are going to help us navigate the addiction problem. And the problem in Holyoke is that drugs are accessible and extremely cheap. And so we have to do what we can to get the drugs off the streets, and collaborate with the stakeholders to work together with those who are the most vulnerable right now, to get them the support and the help they need to get back on their feet. It's a regional issue. The mayor certainly carries a lot of weight, and it's going to be important for the mayor to collaborate with our state and senator delegation to advocate from the governor's office, from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, for a deeper look at this and for the necessary resources to implement strategies that are going to work and minimize this problem as much as possible in the most humane way possible.
Thank you. Dan, the next question.
Thanks. question in a similar vein on the subject. Over the past couple of years, there was a controversial development in a residential setting. It was a 16-bedroom drug treatment group home that was built in the Highlands neighborhood. Do you support these types of group homes in residential settings?
Do I support group homes? Yeah, absolutely. What I don't necessarily support when it comes to this particular issue is the process. Again, when folks make decisions for neighborhoods without actively engaging the citizenry, that's where the frustration is. When things happen without necessarily citizen input. And so it's going to be important as mayor that whenever there's a development opportunity, be it this idea of what we do with the reservoir, right? We put a committee together, they're actively engaging, having public meetings. If we're talking about any other development in a given neighborhood, that the residents in that neighborhood know what's going on, give them an opportunity to provide some feedback and some input, because more often than never, a much more viable solution ultimately comes out of it rather than killing it completely. I wasn't in the inn that ultimately brought this, the Yale Street development to take place. So I'm not sure what might have happened behind the scenes, but from the outside looking in and speaking with the residents of Ward 7 that live in the area, that's where the frustration is. It's not that they're against group homes. They're frustrated because it was done without citizenry input, without transparency.
Mr. Sullivan?
Well, on this one, I'll agree with everything Josh said and expand upon it. What was brought in was not a group home. I'm very familiar with group homes. My family's been involved. My brother lives in Rhode Island. His wife and their family have been involved with group homes for several generations. What we're faced with here is really a medical treatment facility. And there's a big difference. And right now, I'm waiting to see how it plays out in court. And there's other things to make sure that this doesn't happen again, to make sure we have the proper zoning regulations in place. And this isn't to prevent group homes, but it's from using for-profit corporations to benefit and violate the rights and the investments of the people who live in those neighborhoods. And that's what I think we have to be very careful about. It's a very slippery slope. And it's, to me, this particular one is something that has been run under a shell by a for-profit corporation.
Okay, well, thank you. So we're going to ask the last question before the closing statements now, because we're looking at the time. And so what question did we not ask that you would like to answer? Please tell us the question and your answer. And Mr. Sullivan, you're first.
That's tough.
Yeah. Tourism. And I know Holyoke has a wonderful opportunity to expand on tourism. I've had a chance quite a few years back in my younger days, maybe when I was in my 30s and 40s, to do a lot of traveling. And I traveled to Argentina, Chile, Brazil, and volleyball is an immensely popular sport down there. And when I talked with people down there and asked them what they thought of the United States, where did they go? They went to New York City. I mean, you got to be kidding me. You don't go to Yosemite. You don't go to the Grand Canyon. You don't go to Yellowstone. You go to New York City. Well, that was that. But now here we have high-speed rail from New York City right to downtown Holyoke. right to the heart of our arts and entertainment district, the Volleyball Hall of Fame, the Carousel, the Children's Museum, the Canal District, and to partner with some tourism agencies and make that part of a package for people coming to New York, to make it just a day trip on their 10-day package or something like that, I think would be a tremendous opportunity. So that would have been one question I would have loved to have seen come out tonight. How to make Holyoke a tourist destination.
Thank you. Mr. Garcia.
That's a good one, Mike. I think this is the toughest question out of all of it. But as Mike spoke, it gave me a little bit of free time to come up with one. I would say ARPA, the use of ARPA funds. I think the first half of the available ARPA coming to the municipality has been committed, and we have to thank Acting Mayor Murphy, who's done everything he can possible to be cooperative and transparent in the process of committing those funds in such very unusual circumstances. But nevertheless, we do have a second round in the pipeline. And so what I'm looking forward to do with ARPA, understanding that we do have infrastructure funds coming in the very near future, hopefully, is be sure that we take care of the men and women who were active first responders throughout the pandemic period. Secondly, I think we need to invest in the small businesses, the backbone of our community, so that they can focus on rapid recovery efforts, so that we can have the tourism that Mike speaks of. We need to be sure that those businesses who were greatly impacted, that they're getting the support they need from our local government to recover fast. And then also infrastructure, and then supplementing that with whatever other infrastructure funds that are in the pipeline.
Well, thank you. And so we're going to move to the closing statements, and each of you has 2 minutes for your closing statement, and we will start with Mr. Sullivan.
Okay, thank you. So I want to say in closing that Holyoke's always been a place for me of great diversity, and that's been one of our greatest assets. We've always found common ground to work together to make Holyoke a better place to live and grow. Holyoke is a city that opens its arms when other communities turn their backs. My entire focus is right here in Holyoke, and the job of mayor for me is not a step down, right? And we don't need another Morris 2.0. Unlike failed previous administrations, I'm not looking for a stepping stone to a more lucrative job somewhere else. I will not leave Holyoke high and dry for personal gain. I will stay here. I will get the job done. It's what I've done for my entire life. Holyoke needs economic development, not only to create more jobs, but to increase our tax base so we can have lower and fair taxes and provide essential services going forward. A good paying job is one of the best incentives to keep young people off the streets and away from drugs, crime, guns, violence. We can't tell new employers and homeowners to go somewhere else because they can't get natural gas, or force them to use dirtier and more dangerous fuels like oil and propane. It doesn't make sense for the environment. It doesn't make sense for the families of Holyoke, and it doesn't work for business. We can bring in good paying jobs, take back control of our schools so our kids are prepared to get these jobs. We can invest in green energy, create a public citywide internet, and fix our infrastructure.
Thank you. Mr. Garcia, 2 minutes.
I can tell you that there's no stepping stone here, and I want to assure the community that I'm certainly not looking for a retirement plan as mayor in the city of Holyoke. Look, Holyoke's taking care of me and my family growing up. I'm a lot of ways, I'm a product of the city of Holyoke. I'm a product of its social service environment. It's helped my family when we were down and out. It's helping my family today. My kids are in the school system. And so, as mayor, I want to do what I can to give back to those families, just like how Holyoke has taken care of me and my family. And that's really the bottom line here. I see the trajectory that we're in. Thankfully, I have some experience that I want to offer to help put Holyoke in a better path forward. Certainly want to make sure that when we do that we do that where the quality of life in every corner of our city is impacted. I think, it's not all doom and gloom either. Holyoke's definitely made a lot of progress to date. One of which I can tell you is that me being here right now, never in Holyoke's history has there ever been someone like me that's made it through the primaries and can potentially very well be the next mayor of the city of Holyoke. And when I say me, I mean a kid from South Holyoke where the median household income is only $18,000 a year, a kid whose family came from the island of Puerto Rico. And that's progress. And so I'm very much looking forward to getting beyond November 2nd and working with my colleagues, be it the departments and members of our council and the rest of the community at large. So to prioritize and focus on the issues at hand and help contribute with my experience, help lift that in a much positive direction forward. Thank you, everybody.
Well, thank you to the candidates, and I'm going to give it back to Sharon from the league.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to close this forum by thanking both the candidates for their participation in our democratic process and for this excellent discussion tonight. I'd also like to thank Bryn Gorman of the statewide office of the Massachusetts League of Women Voters for facilitating this webinar, Lynn Brodsky of the League of the Winchester League for serving as our moderator, Cynthia DiGeronimo of the Northampton League for serving as timekeeper, Lou Booley and Janice Moulton of the Northampton League for serving as technical hosts, Dan Crowley for representing the Daily Hampshire Gazette and for asking half the questions, Scott McPherson of Holyoke Media for facilitating the recording of this event, and the staff of Transfluency, most especially Michelle Cermeno, for translating this event. Please tell your friends and neighbors that if they missed watching the forum this evening, it will be available to stream on Holyoke Media's website between now, or perhaps I should say between tomorrow and November 2nd. And they'll be able to find the link both on the Holyoke Media website and on the website of the League of Women Voters of the Northampton area. And to all of you who are watching or who watch us sometime after tonight, please remember to vote on November 2nd. For information on where to vote in your particular wards, you can visit the website of the Holyoke Registrar of Voters. The polls will be open on Election Day from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. If you wish to vote by mail, you must submit your absentee ballot application by tomorrow, October 27th. Thank you and good night.